The wind battered the old manor with a mournful howl, rattling the ancient panes as Isabella Montfort pressed her forehead to the cold glass. Her hands trembled, not from the chill, but from the weight of fear settling over her heart. The rolling hills of Hampshire, once lush with promise, now seemed to mock her with their indifferent beauty. Below, her brother Arthur chased a stray chicken, his laughter too young, too innocent for the doom that pressed in on them all. A violent cough echoed from the study. Isabella straightened, skirts whispering as she hurried to her father's side. The room reeked of laudanum and stale air, the curtains drawn against the cruel sun. "You must find a way, Isabella," Edward Montfort rasped, clutching her hand in his skeletal grip. "The estate cannot last the winter. And Arthur, he is but a child." She forced a reassuring smile. "We will not lose Montfort Hall, Papa." "I promise." His eyes, glassy with illness, searched hers. "A promise is only words, my dear. You must act. The world is not kind to women without fortune, or men too young to fight for it." When he drifted into uneasy sleep, Isabella lingered, heart-pounding. The neighbors had already begun to whisper about her father's debts, about the shrinking staff, about the once grand house now shadowed by ruin. There had been suitors once, but none would court a penniless daughter of a dying man. Later, as twilight deepened, Isabella sat at her small writing desk, reading and rereading the latest letter from her cousin in London. "The Marquess of Ravenshire seeks a wife," she had written. "He desires respectability above all. No scandals. No fortune hunters. A widow would be unassailable. Her reputation beyond reproach." Isabella's hands curled around the paper. A widow. In society's eyes, widowhood offered a peculiar sort of armor-mourning veils and black silk, the comfort of presumed virtue. No one would question a widow's independence, nor her urgency to remarry. Her breath caught as the plan took shape, both daring and desperate. She would become the widow Montfort of fiction, yes, but a necessary one, for Arthur, for her father, for the land that ran in her blood. The next morning she found her father awake, his eyes sharp despite the fever. "I have made a decision, Papa," she said, voice steady. "I will go to London. There may yet be a way to secure our future." He squeezed her hand. "You are brave, my girl. I only wish the world allowed for softer choices." She pressed a kiss to his brow, tears stinging her eyes. "I will not fail you." The days that followed blurred into feverish activity. She sewed her own morning gowns from what remained of her mother's silks, dyeing them midnight black. She rehearsed her new name before the mirror, Isabella Montfort, widow of an officer lost to fever in the colonies. At the village station, Arthur clung to her skirts, wide-eyed. "Will you be gone long, Bella?" "Not long, dearest," she lied, smoothing his hair. "I will write to you every week." Her father's thin arms encircled her in a rare embrace. "Remember, dignity above all. Do not let them see your fear." The train to London puffed and shrieked, carrying her away from the only home she had ever known. Each mile pressed the weight of her deception more tightly against her chest, but she did not falter. London was a world of masks, and she would wear hers as well as any duchess. In the city, she took rooms at a respectable boarding house for ladies in mourning, presenting herself as the grieving widow Montfort. The landlady, Mrs. Hargrove, eyed her with gentle sympathy. "You poor dear, so young to have lost your husband. The world is cruel, but London is kinder to widows than to maidens with empty pockets." Isabella nodded, lowering her gaze beneath the heavy veil. "Thank you, Mrs. Hargrove. I only hope to find peace, and perhaps a new beginning." Within days, invitations arrived, teas, musicales, charitable committees, each one addressed to Mrs. Montfort. Her reputation, built on black silk and soft-spoken sorrow, opened doors that would have remained forever barred to the destitute daughter of a country squire. And in the drawing rooms of Mayfair, the name of the Marquess of Ravenshire echoed like a promise. He was wealthy, formidable, and in need of a wife above suspicion. Isabella's heart pounded with every whispered mention, every sidelong glance from matrons eager to matchmake. She gazed out her window at the endless city, resolve hardening. For Arthur, for her father, for Montfort Hall, she would risk everything. Isabella smoothed the black crape at her wrists and lifted her chin. Tomorrow, she would begin her campaign in earnest. The fate of her family depended on it. What she did not know was that in the heart of London, Alexander Blackwood, Marquess of Ravenshire, had just heard the first tantalizing whispers of the mysterious Widow Montfort. The ballroom at Lady Ashcombe's townhouse glittered with the fervor of the season. Chandeliers spilled golden light over the throng of silks and jewels, over the measured laughter and the calculated glances of London's nobility. Isabella Montfort stood at the edge of it all, clad in the sombre elegance of a morning gown, her veil a shadow over her luminous eyes. She clung to her role poised, serene, untouchable. She had mastered the art of gentle refusal, of demure smiles behind her black lace, and of answering questions with just enough sorrow to quiet further inquiry. The matrons praised her composure. The young ladies whispered of her mysterious past. The gentlemen watched, hungry for novelty. Isabella endured it all with a grace born of desperation. "My dear Mrs. Montfort, you must allow me to present you to Lady Hartley," trilled Mrs. Hargrove, bustling to her side. "She is quite the authority on charitable endeavors, and so fond of young widows." "Of course, Mrs. Hargrove," Isabella replied softly, her voice tinged with the requisite melancholy. She had learned to let her gaze linger on nothing for too long, to let her gloved hands rest with quiet dignity atop her skirts. Lady Hartley studied her with sharp eyes. "You are recently arrived in town, I hear." "Yes, my lady. I have found London welcoming, despite my circumstances." Isabella dipped her head, letting the heaviness of her veil shield her. Lady Hartley's voice softened. "One can find new purpose here, Mrs. Montfort. I do hope you will join us at the Orphans' Benefit next week. The work is most rewarding." "I would be honored, my lady." As the conversation drifted, Isabella felt the weight of a gaze upon her. She turned, heart quickening, and met the dark, assessing eyes of Alexander Blackwood, Marquess of Ravenshire. He stood apart from the crowd, tall and impeccably dressed, his bearing radiating both command and wariness. The room seemed to hush around him. Isabella did not look away. She met his scrutiny with the calm resolve she had learned to summon. He inclined his head, and the faintest hint of a wry smile touched his lips before he returned his attention to a group of gentlemen at his side. The next day, the pattern repeated at Lady Wilton's tea, at Lord Carmichael's musicale. Isabella moved through each event with measured grace, her morning attire a shield against prying curiosity and unsuitable attention. But everywhere she went, the Marquess was there, sometimes across the room, sometimes near enough that his low voice brushed her senses. He watched her, and she felt the force of his attention like a physical thing. "He's looking at you again," murmured Mrs. Hargrove at the edge of a crowded drawing room. "Who?" Isabella feigned ignorance, though her pulse thudded. "The Marquess of Ravenshire. He is not easily impressed nor easily amused." Mrs. Hargrove's eyes gleamed with the prospect of matchmaking. "He has a reputation for being difficult." Isabella smiled politely, but her thoughts churned. She had heard the stories. Alexander Blackwood, heir to an ancient fortune, left wary by betrayal, a fiancé who had loved his title but not the man. Since then he had withdrawn, granting his presence only grudgingly to the demands of society. That evening, at the Ashcombe supper, fate drew them together. Isabella found herself seated beside the Marquess, the world reduced to the expanse of white linen and crystal between them. "Mrs. Montfort," he began, his voice low and resonant. "I trust you are finding London to your liking." "London has been kind, my lord," she answered, careful to keep her tone composed, "though it is a different world from Hampshire." "Hampshire?" he echoed, curiosity piqued. "You are from the south, then?" "Yes, my late husband's family had property near Winchester." The lie slid easily from her lips, yet something in Alexander's gaze made her wonder if he sensed the tremor beneath her calm. He studied her for a long moment. "You are admirably self-possessed, Mrs. Montfort. Most newcomers find the city overwhelming, especially under such circumstances." "I have little choice but to endure, my lord," she said, allowing a note of honest sorrow to color her words. "My family depends on my fortitude." He inclined his head, a rare quality. Too many are content to drift. His voice was gentle, yet Isabella sensed the challenge in his words, a test of her resolve, or perhaps his own. She looked away, uncertain whether he meant to reassure her or to unsettle. Later, as the guests spilled into the garden for air, Alexander approached her once more. Moonlight silvered the terrace, softening the hard angles of his face. "Forgive me, Mrs. Montfort," he said quietly, "if my questions earlier seemed intrusive. It is not my habit to pry." "You were not intrusive, my lord," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is only that I am unused to such attentions." He hesitated, then, "You carry your sorrows well, but I wonder, do you ever tire of being strong?" His words struck something deep within her. For a moment, Isabella almost let her guard slip. "I do," she admitted, "but strength is all I have left." Their eyes met, the world narrowing to the space between them. Alexander's expression softened, but the wariness remained, as though he weighed every word, every glance. That night, in her modest room, Isabella paced. The marquess had seen more than she intended. She could not afford to draw his suspicion, nor to be found wanting. She reviewed her story, her imaginary husband, her supposed years abroad, the details she must remember, and those she must never speak aloud. Yet, the next day, another invitation arrived, this one unmistakably from Ravenshire House. A week later, Isabella found herself in the grand marble foyer, her heart thudding as she followed a stiff-backed butler into a sunlit salon. Alexander stood by the window, his gaze on the rain-slicked street below. He turned as she entered, and the air between them thickened with unspoken things. "Mrs. Montfort," he greeted, his tone formal, but his eyes were searching. "Thank you for accepting my invitation." "I am honored, my lord," Isabella replied, folding her hands, willing herself to remain composed. He gestured to a chair. "My mother is eager to meet you. She is anxious for me to marry, as mothers so often are." Lady Ravenshire swept into the room, regal and appraising. "So this is the widow Montfort," she announced, her gaze sharp as a falcon's. "I have heard much of your dignity, madam. I hope London has not been too unkind." "Your hospitality has been most gracious, my lady," Isabella answered, holding her ground beneath the scrutiny. The conversation turned to the trivialities of society, yet Isabella felt the undercurrent of examination. Lady Ravenshire asked about her charity work, about her time abroad, about her family. Isabella answered with practiced modesty, but Alexander watched her with unsettling intensity, as though he listened for the discordant note in every phrase. After tea, Lady Ravenshire excused herself, leaving them alone. Alexander spoke softly. "You are an enigma, Mrs. Montfort." "There are those who would say that is a dangerous thing to be." She met his gaze. "I have nothing to hide, my lord." His lips twisted in a half-smile, skepticism and admiration mingling. "Perhaps, or perhaps you simply hide it well." He stepped closer, the scent of rain and leather clinging to him. "My family is insistent that I marry. They believe an unblemished reputation is all that matters. I have learned otherwise." She heard the pain behind his words, the echo of old wounds. For a moment, Isabella longed to offer comfort, but the risk was too great. "I'm not here to entrap you, my lord," she said quietly. "My concerns are only for my family." He studied her, as if weighing the truth of her statement. "Then we are alike, after all, bound by duty, wary of betrayal." A silence fell between them, charged and fragile. As Isabella left Ravenshire House, the sky threatened rain, the city's heart beating with secrets. She knew the Marquess's attention was both a blessing and a danger one misstep, and her carefully woven story would unravel. Yet she could not help the flutter of hope in her chest. For the first time, she sensed that her fate and his might be entwined in ways neither could yet foresee. What Isabella did not realize was that, even as she resolved to guard her secrets, Alexander had already decided he would discover the truth, no matter the cost. A thin mist clung to the streets of Mayfair as Isabella stepped from her carriage, her heart beating an anxious rhythm beneath her black silk. Each day in London seemed to tighten the invisible net around her. Every glance, every whispered greeting was a test of her composure. She had learned to move through the town's glittering gatherings with a mask of serenity, but behind it, nerves frayed with every passing hour. This morning's post had brought a new volley of invitations, most notably, another summons from Ravenshire House. The Marquess wished to further their acquaintance, the note read, and Lady Ravenshire herself would be in attendance. Isabella's hands had trembled as she broke the wax seal, the ink blurring as she read it twice over. Now, as she ascended the marble steps, she sensed eyes upon her from behind the lace curtains. Neighbors, rivals, would-be suitors, all eager to witness the next act in the unfolding drama of the mysterious widow. London's appetite for gossip was insatiable, and already rumors swirled like autumn leaves. Who was Mrs. Montfort truly? What did she want from the Marquess? Why did she never speak of her late husband? Inside, the butler led her to a drawing-room flooded with pale light. Lady Ravenshire, regal in lavender silk, rose from her seat with an arched brow. Alexander stood beside her, his expression unreadable, the slightest tension in his stance betraying his unease. "Mrs. Montfort," Lady Ravenshire intoned, her gaze cool and appraising. "You are most punctual." A rare quality in these turbulent times. "I'm honored by your invitation, my lady," Isabella replied, dipping into a graceful curtsy. Alexander stepped forward. "May I offer you tea, Mrs. Montfort?" His voice was gentle, but Isabella sensed the undercurrent, a search for truths behind her practiced composure. "Thank you, my lord. That would be most welcome." They settled around a gleaming table, the porcelain delicate as eggshells. The silence that followed was taut as wire. Lady Ravenshire broke it. "My son tells me you are fond of reading, Mrs. Montfort. What authors occupy your leisure?" "Lately Wordsworth and Austen, my lady, though my time for novels is scarce." Isabella kept her answers measured, aware that every word would be weighed. "Your education does you credit," Lady Ravenshire replied, her tone neutral, "and your manners suggest a fine upbringing." "Pray, what was your husband's regiment?" Isabella's fingers tightened around her teacup. "The 34th Foot, my lady. He was stationed in India before his illness." "Ah, the tropics are cruel to English constitutions." Lady Ravenshire's eyes lingered on Isabella's face. "You speak of him with admirable restraint. Some might say too little." Alexander's gaze flickered to his mother, then back to Isabella, as if measuring her response. "My grief is a private matter," Isabella replied softly, "but I am grateful for the kindness I have found here." Lady Ravenshire nodded, but the faintest suspicion lingered in her eyes. Later, Alexander asked Isabella to join him in the conservatory, away from his mother's scrutiny. Sunlight filtered through glass, gilding the air with warmth. Exotic blooms scented the space. The hush felt almost intimate. "Forgive my mother," Alexander began, searching her face for cracks in her composure. "She's protective sometimes to excess." "I understand, my lord. She only wishes for your happiness." Isabella's tone was gentle, but she could not hide the tremor of fatigue. He studied her, arms folded. "You must find all this attention exhausting. The gossip is relentless." "It is the price one pays for survival in London," Isabella replied, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. "Widows are objects of both pity and speculation." He hesitated, as if weighing a confession. "I know what it is to be judged by whispers. Since my engagement ended, I have found trust in short supply." She met his gaze, vulnerability flickering in her eyes. "And yet you risk it now, with me." He looked away. "I do not trust easily, Mrs. Montfort, but I find myself wanting to." A charged silence stretched between them. Isabella longed to close the distance, to reach for the comfort she saw in his eyes, but fear held her fast. The risk of discovery, of ruin, was never far from her mind. Returning to her lodgings that night, Isabella paced restlessly. The city was alive with rumor. She heard her name whispered behind fans, saw heads turn when she entered a room. Each encounter with Alexander left her more exposed, more vulnerable to the scrutiny of the tongue and the probing curiosity of his mother. At Lady Durham's soiree, Isabella found herself the object of pointed questions. A matron leaned in close, her perfume cloying. "You must tell me, my dear, where did you meet your late husband? We have so little news from India these days." Isabella managed a trembling smile. "We were introduced by family friends. just before he shipped out. Another lady pressed her, voice sly. And what was his Christian name? Isabella's mind scrambled for the detail. Charles, she lied, heart pounding. She felt the skepticism in their eyes, but the conversation shifted as Alexander entered the room. He crossed directly to Isabella, offering his arm. Would you care for some air, Mrs. Montfort? Relief flooded her as she took his arm. Outside on the terrace, the city stretched below them in a haze of lamplight. You handled them well, Alexander murmured, his gaze steady. Society can be cruel. She looked up at him, the ache of loneliness momentarily overwhelming. I'm tired, my lord, tired of being measured, of pretending. He hesitated, then said, You can be yourself with me, Isabella. She flinched at the intimacy of her name on his lips. I'm not sure I remember who that is. He lifted her gloved hand to his lips, a gesture both tender and possessive. Then let us discover it together. For a heartbeat, she allowed herself to hope. But the moment shattered as Lady Ravensshire appeared in the doorway, her eyes sharp as a hawk's. Alexander, a word, if you please. Her gaze flicked to Isabella, cool and assessing. Later, in the carriage home, Isabella's mind raced. The Duchess's suspicions were growing. The questions came faster, more pointed. The tone's whispers had become a storm, and Isabella was caught in its heart. Yet, in the days that followed, Alexander's invitations persisted. He sought her out at every gathering, his conversations growing more personal, more searching. Sometimes his hand lingered at her waist a moment too long. Sometimes his eyes lingered on her lips. The tension between them crackled, impossible to ignore. At a private dinner, Alexander dismissed the servants and poured them each a glass of wine. Tell me the truth, Isabella. Are you in danger? She stared at him, heart pounding. Why would you think so? Because you are afraid, he replied quietly, and I have come to care for you more than I intended. She looked away, unable to meet his gaze. My family depends on me. That is all. He reached for her hand, his voice raw. Let me help you. Tears pricked her eyes, but she shook her head. You cannot. The moment hung between them, full of longing, regret, and unspoken truths. That night, as Isabella returned to her boarding house, she found a letter slipped beneath her door. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the message terse. I know who you are. The truth will out. Isabella's hands shook as she read the words. The walls of her new world seemed to close in, the threat of exposure more real than ever. She pressed the note to her chest, the weight of her secrets heavier than ever. What she did not see was the shadow lingering across the street, watching, waiting, ready to upend everything she had fought so hard to protect. A hush of expectancy hung over Ravenshire House as Isabella arrived, the ancient stone facade rising pale and imperious against the brooding sky. Her heart drummed with anxious anticipation, for today she would step into the very heart of the Blackwood family, no longer merely an object of curiosity, but now a woman under the closest scrutiny. The grand hall gleamed with polished marble, the air scented with beeswax and hothouse roses. Servants bowed, ushering her through corridors lined with ancestral portraits, whose painted eyes seemed to follow her every step. Lady Ravensshire received her in the morning room, surrounded by her daughters and a visiting aunt, the formidable Lady Agatha. The women, arrayed like a court of judges in their pastel silks, studied Isabella with veiled calculation. How lovely to have you at Ravenshire, Mrs. Montfort, Lady Agatha said, voice sweet but edged. It is rare for Alexander to invite a guest for so extended a stay. I'm honored, Lady Agatha, Isabella replied, keeping her tone steady as she met each pair of searching eyes. Your reputation precedes you, murmured Cecilia, the youngest Blackwood sister. London cannot stop speaking of you. Lady Ravenshire's lips curved in a polite, unreadable smile. We are a close family, Mrs. Montfort. We value honesty above all. I trust you find that a virtue. Isabella inclined her head. Indeed, my lady, I find honesty essential. Yet the conversation was a dance of implications and polite traps. Lady Agatha questioned her about her time in India, pressing for names of acquaintances and favorite places. The Blackwood sisters asked about her upbringing, her family, her interests. Isabella answered as best she could, weaving truth and fiction with careful grace, but she felt the tension rising with every query. During luncheon, Lord Hawthorne joined the company. Tall, sharp-featured, and dressed impeccably, he carried himself with the air of a man used to admiration. His presence sent a ripple through the room. He was known for his charm, his fortune, and his jealous pursuit of Isabella since her arrival in London. "My lady," he said, bowing over Isabella's hand with elaborate courtesy, "it is a pleasure to see you again. Ravenshire House is much enlivened by your presence." She forced a pleasant smile. "You are too kind, Lord Hawthorne." Alexander entered at that moment, his gaze sweeping the room and lingering on Isabella with undisguised warmth. The connection between them was palpable, sending a spark through the assembled family. "Mrs. Montfort, would you care for a stroll in the gardens after luncheon?" Alexander asked, his voice intimate in its restraint. "I would be delighted, my lord," Isabella replied, her relief at the escape nearly overwhelming. They left the house together, moving into the lush embrace of the Ravenshire gardens. The air was fragrant with lilacs and the promise of rain, the gravel paths winding between ancient yews and riotous beds of peonies. For a while, they walked in companionable silence, the world reduced to the quiet crunch of pebbles beneath their feet. Alexander finally spoke, his tone gentle. "You have endured much today. My family can be formidable." She glanced at him, a wry smile playing at her lips. "I expected nothing less. They care for you deeply. It is only natural they wish to know the woman who has so captured your attention." He stopped beside a marble bench, turning to face her fully. "Isabella, I must ask, are you content here, with me?" She looked away, struggling to marshal her thoughts. I do not know. There are moments when I feel myself again, and others when I am so afraid of what tomorrow may bring." Alexander's expression softened. "You are not alone in your fears. After my broken engagement, I thought never to trust again. But with you, I find myself hoping." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a promise, or perhaps a plea. Inside the house, Lord Hawthorne prowled the corridors. He had never believed Isabella's story. Her poise, her reluctance to discuss her late husband, her sudden ascent in society, these were mysteries he could not abide. He summoned a footman. "Tell me, has Mrs. Montfort received any unusual correspondence of late?" Hawthorne's tone was low and urgent. The footman hesitated, then nodded. "A letter, sir, slipped under her door. No signature." Hawthorne's eyes narrowed. "If you hear or see anything more, you will inform me, at once." He was determined to uncover Isabella's secret, even if it meant destroying her in the process. That afternoon, as clouds gathered over the estate, Alexander and Isabella sat together in the rose garden, their conversation deepening with every passing moment. "Tell me about your childhood," he urged softly. "Not the rehearsed answers for the drawing room, but your true memories." She closed her eyes, recalling sunlit fields and laughter, the scent of hay, and the comfort of her brother's small hand in hers. "We were happy before my father's health declined. I used to believe the world was a kind place." Alexander's hand covered hers. "I wish I could have spared you that pain." She shook her head. "We cannot choose our sorrows, only how we survive them." He regarded her with admiration. "You have survived with courage. I have never met a woman like you." A flush crept up Isabella's cheeks. "You are too generous, my lord." He smiled, a rare, genuine warmth. "No. I see your strength, your intelligence, your kindness. These are not so common as you imagine." As evening fell, the household gathered in the drawing room. Lady Ravenshire's eyes lingered on Isabella, her suspicion undimmed. Conversation turned to politics, to music, to family, always circling back to Isabella's origins, as if the truth might slip from her lips if only the right question were asked. Lord Hawthorne, emboldened by jealousy and the promise of scandal, pressed her. "Mrs. Montfort, you must tell us what was your late husband's greatest virtue." Isabella's breath caught. She forced a sad smile. "He was steadfast in all things." Alexander's gaze found hers, concern flickering in his eyes. Later, as the guests dispersed, he drew her aside. "You do not have to answer them, Isabella. Not if it causes you pain." She looked up, her eyes shining with gratitude and something deeper, more dangerous. "Thank you, Alexander. You are very kind." He hesitated, as if on the verge of saying more, then pressed her hand gently and let her go. That night, Isabella lay awake, the events of the day swirling in her mind. The Blackwood's questions, Lady Ravenshire's skepticism, Lord Hawthorne's growing obsession, it was all closing in. She thought of her father's warning, of Arthur's innocent face, of the promise she had made to save them all. In the days that followed, Alexander sought her company at every opportunity. They walked beneath the elms, read poetry in the shade, and shared laughter that echoed like fragile hope. He spoke of his childhood, of his fears, of the loneliness that had shadowed him since his fiancée's betrayal. "You are not what I expected, Isabella," he told her one afternoon as rain pattered on the glass-house roof. "You challenge me. You comfort me. You make me believe in happiness again." She felt the warmth of his words seep into the cold spaces of her heart. Yet guilt gnawed at her. Each kindness, each moment of trust, was another stone in the wall of deception she had built. One evening, as twilight gilded the gardens, Alexander led her to a secluded bower, fragrant with honeysuckle. "There is something I wish to ask you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. She looked up, startled by the intensity in his eyes. "I have searched for a companion, Isabella, not merely a wife, someone to stand beside me, to share my burdens and my joys. In you I have found that rarest of treasures, a true partner. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The world seemed to pause. Isabella's breath caught, her heart aching with hope and dread in equal measure. She glanced away, her thoughts racing, her father's failing health, Arthur's future, the secret she carried like a stone. Alexander's hand found hers, steady and warm. "You need not answer at once. I know you have suffered, and I would not add to your burdens. But I hope you can see that my heart is yours." Tears pricked Isabella's eyes. The longing in his words, the sincerity in his gaze, broke something in her. She wanted to believe, to accept the happiness offered her, but fear and guilt threatened to overwhelm her. That night, she wrote a letter to her father, her words a tangle of relief and shame. "He has asked for my hand, Papa. I do not know what to do. If I confess, I risk all. If I accept, I must live with the lie. Forgive me. I'm so tired." Before dawn, her reply arrived, a shaky, loving hand urging her to seize her chance to save them all. With the new day, Isabella returned to the gardens where Alexander awaited her, hope and apprehension mingling in his features. She lifted her chin, drawing strength from the memory of her family, from the man before her who had seen through to her soul. "Yes, Alexander," she whispered, "I will marry you." His face lit with joy, and he gathered her in his arms, sealing her promise with a kiss that tasted of sunlight and rain. But as they embraced, Isabella saw a shadow moving behind the hedges, a figure watching, waiting, ready to strike. Lord Hawthorne's eyes burned with jealous triumph, and Isabella knew her greatest trial was yet to come. As wedding preparations began, the air in Ravenshire House shimmered with anticipation and secrets. Isabella's heart beat with hope and dread, for the happiness she craved was now bound to a lie she could not escape. What she did not know was how close her past truly was, nor how swiftly it would come to claim her. A feverish sense of anticipation seized Ravenshire House as preparations for the wedding swept through every corridor and salon. Footmen dashed up and down with armfuls of white lilies. Seamstresses hunched over veils and silks by candlelight. The entire household pulsed with a nervous energy, as if the grandeur of the impending union might shake loose the secrets hiding in the shadows. Isabella watched it unfold with trembling hands. Hope and remorse warred within her, their struggle written in the pale crescents beneath her eyes. At her writing desk, she tried again and again to confess her deception, pen poised over a fresh sheet of paper as the day's light waned. "My dearest Alexander," she began, her hand trembling, "before you take me as your wife, you must know." The words blurred. Her mind conjured visions of Alexander's face, shattered by betrayal. of Arthur cast into the streets, of her father's heart failing with the news. Fear overwhelmed her resolve, and with a strangled sob, she tore the letter in two, feeding the scraps to the fire. The flames devoured her confession, but guilt lingered, heavy as lead. Downstairs, the house hummed with visitors and well-wishers. London society had seized upon the wedding as the event of the season, delighted by the union of the enigmatic widow and the most eligible marquess in England. Gossip columns praised Isabella's beauty and discretion, her tragic past and her miraculous good fortune. Yet beneath the polite applause, suspicion still simmered. The Duchess, regal and unsmiling, watched Isabella with a gaze that never softened. She spoke little, but her eyes followed every movement, her silences heavy with unspoken doubts. At dinner, she offered pointed questions. "Mrs. Montfort, you have not mentioned your late husband's family. Will any relatives be joining us for the ceremony?" Isabella's pulse fluttered. "No, my lady. They are all abroad now, scattered in service to the crown." The Duchess's lips tightened. "So many absences. It is most unfortunate." Alexander, seated at Isabella's side, reached for her hand beneath the table. A silent reassurance, a promise that he would shield her from the world's cruelties. Yet even he was not immune to the currents of doubt. Late at night, he sat at his desk surrounded by letters and ledgers, searching for any proof of Isabella's history. His contacts in India replied with polite regret. No records of a Charles Montfort in the 34th foot. No mention of a young widow returned from the colonies. He frowned, reading the letters by candlelight. "There must be something," he muttered. "She cannot be a ghost." But each new inquiry led only to more questions, and Alexander could not bring himself to confront Isabella, not when she looked at him with such trusting eyes. Meanwhile, Isabella's family pressed her from afar. Letters arrived from Hampshire, the handwriting shaky with gratitude and relief. "We are saved, Bella," her father wrote. "Arthur is well fed and clothed. The creditors have ceased their threats. You must hold fast to your secret. We cannot lose everything again." Isabella wept quietly over these words, torn between the duty that had driven her to London and the guilt that gnawed at her soul. She longed to confess, to throw herself on Alexander's mercy. But the faces of her family haunted her dreams. The days flew past in a blur of fittings, interviews with florists, and endless lists. Isabella moved through it all with the quiet composure expected of her, her mourning replaced by the pale silks and pearls of a bride. Yet every mirror seemed to reflect not a woman in love, but an impostor. One afternoon, as the house was swept up in the commotion of deliveries, Isabella slipped away to her chamber, a blank sheet of paper before her. She stared at it, feeling the weight of every lie she had spoken, every truth she had hidden. "I must tell him," she whispered, but her hand would not move. The memory of her father's frail voice, Arthur's laughter, the desperate hope in their letters, these things held her fast. She pressed her lips together, then tore the paper in half, as she had so many times before. That evening, Alexander found her alone in the library. He looked tired, the shadows beneath his eyes betraying sleepless nights. "Are you well?" he asked gently. "I'm only tired," she replied, forcing a smile. "There is so much to do." He studied her, searching for something in her gaze. "If you are troubled, you can trust me. I would do anything for you, Isabella." Her breath caught. For a moment she nearly confessed, nearly surrendered the burden she carried. But the image of her family's ruin rose before her, and she only nodded. "I know," she said softly. "You are very good to me." He brushed a kiss to her forehead, lingering as if he could sense the storm within her. "We shall weather all things together, my love." The day before the wedding dawned grey and uncertain. Isabella wandered the gardens alone, the air heavy with the scent of roses and rain. The memory of every deception, every careful omission pressed down on her. She felt watched by the Duchess, by the staff, by the city itself. In the distance, she saw Alexander conferring with his solicitor. A brief hope fluttered. Perhaps he would discover the truth before it was too late, and she would not have to bear the burden of choice. But the hours passed, and no confrontation came. That night, Isabella sat at her dressing table, her wedding gown laid out before her like a sentence. She stared at her reflection, her eyes hollow and frightened. She took a deep breath, pressed her hands together, and made a silent vow. "I will never reveal the truth," she whispered to the empty room. "I will protect my family, whatever the cost. This secret will die with me." The words echoed in the darkness, binding her to the lie that had saved them all, and to the love she had found, built on shifting sands. Outside, a storm gathered over London, thunder rumbling in the distance. Isabella rose and closed the curtains against the night, her heart heavy, her future uncertain. She did not know that the winds of fate had already begun to change, and that the truth she had sworn to bury would not remain hidden forever. The bells of St. George's tolled across London, their notes spilling through the June air like peals of hope and warning. At the entrance to the church, carriages lined the curb, gleaming black and silver, their doors opening to discharge the city's most illustrious guests. A crowd pressed against the iron gates, straining for a glimpse of the spectacle within. Inside, beneath soaring arches and a vault of painted angels, Isabella stood veiled in white, her hands trembling around her bouquet of lilies. The gown, a confection of silk and lace, trailed behind her, like a river of moonlight. She felt the weight of every eye in the pews, every whispered speculation, every blessing and curse bestowed by the watching city. Each step forward was a negotiation with her own conscience, the truth burning beneath her skin. The nave was filled with the scent of roses and beeswax. The Duchess sat in the front row, her posture regal, her gaze sharp as ever. Arthur, wide-eyed and solemn in his new suit, watched his sister with fierce pride. Behind them, the Blackwood sisters whispered and dabbed their eyes with lace handkerchiefs. Only Lord Hawthorne, lurking near a marble pillar, wore an expression of cold calculation. The organ swelled as Isabella began her walk down the aisle, her father's absence a silent ache at her side. Alexander waited at the altar, tall and impossibly handsome in his formal attire, his face a careful mask of composure. But when their eyes met, his expression softened, and for a moment the world fell away. The guests, the whispers, the threat of ruin, all vanished in the warmth of his gaze. She reached him, and he took her hand, steadying her. The vicar's voice rang out, solemn and sure, guiding them through the sacred vows. Isabella's voice faltered only once, her promise to love and honor catching in her throat as the enormity of her secret pressed down. "With this ring I thee wed," Alexander said, his voice low and reverent, slipping the band onto her trembling finger. "With this ring I thee wed," she replied, her voice a whisper, her heart breaking and soaring all at once. The ceremony ended in a flurry of music and applause. As they left the altar, confetti rained down, white as snow, and Alexander pressed a gentle kiss to her brow. The congregation rose in celebration, the air thrumming with congratulations and the rustle of silks. The reception unfolded in the grand ballroom of Ravenshire House, awash in candlelight and laughter. Guests toasted the couple with crystal goblets. A string quartet played waltzes beneath gilded ceilings. Isabella moved through the throng with Alexander at her side, accepting felicitations with practiced grace. The Duchess, though polite, did not relinquish her watchfulness, her gaze flickering between Isabella and the crowd. Between dances, Isabella caught sight of Lord Hawthorne lingering near a column, his eyes fixed on her with unsettling intensity. She excused herself to take some air, weaving through the crowd until she reached the terrace. Hawthorne joined her, his steps soft on the flagstones. "A breathtaking ceremony, Mrs. Blackwood. Or may I say, Lady Ravenshire?" She stiffened. "What do you want, Lord Hawthorne?" He smiled, all charm and venom. "Only to wish you happiness, though I wonder, does happiness sit easily on a foundation of lies?" Her blood ran cold. "You presume too much, sir." He leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "Do I? I know you, Isabella Montfort, or rather, I know what you are not. It would be a pity for such secrets to mar the first day of your new life." She fought to keep her composure. "If you threaten me, you threaten the marquess as well." "I will not be intimidated." He straightened, bowing mockingly. "Of course. I only mean to remind you that the truth has a way of surfacing, especially in such illustrious company." He slipped away, leaving Isabella breathless and shaken. As she turned, She saw Alexander watching from the French doors, his brow furrowed. He approached at once, concern etched into his features. "Are you unwell?" he asked, taking her hand. She forced a smile. "Only a little overwhelmed. It is all rather much." He glanced over her shoulder at Hawthorne, suspicion flaring in his eyes. "Did he trouble you?" She shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. Alexander drew her close, his voice low. "You need not fear him, Isabella, or anyone else. I will protect you from all harm, this I promise you." His words were a balm and a blade. She longed to believe him, to surrender her burdens, but the memory of Hawthorne's threat gnawed at her peace. The dancing resumed, and the couple moved through the waltzes as husband and wife. Guests showered them with blessings, the Duchess's smile brittle but unyielding. Arthur clung to Isabella's skirts, beaming with delight at the marvel of it all. For a few hours, happiness seemed within reach, a fragile, glittering thing. Yet beneath the laughter and music, tension simmered. Alexander's gaze lingered on Hawthorne, his arm tightening protectively around Isabella's waist. When their eyes met, a question flickered there, unasked and unanswered. Late into the evening, as the last toasts were made and the crowd thinned, Alexander led Isabella from the ballroom. The carriage awaited, its lamps glowing in the darkness. Servants lined the steps, offering farewells. The newlyweds climbed inside, the door closing on the chaos of the day. The drive to Ravenshire was silent, the city's lights fading behind them. Isabella rested her head against Alexander's shoulder, seeking comfort in his nearness, yet unable to quiet the storm inside her. He traced her fingers with his voice gentle. "You are quiet." She managed a small laugh. "It has been a day unlike any other. I feel as if I'm living in a dream." He kissed her hand. "Then let it be a good dream. I have waited so long for this happiness, Isabella. Whatever shadows may come, I will stand by you. That is my vow." Tears pricked her eyes. "You are too good to me, Alexander. I do not deserve." He silenced her with a soft kiss, his hands framing her face. "You deserve every joy, every comfort. Whatever burdens you carry, you do not bear them alone, now." They arrived at Ravenshire, the manor bathed in moonlight, its windows aglow with anticipation. The household had prepared the bridal suite with flowers and candlelight, a sanctuary of intimacy and promise. As Alexander closed the door behind them, Isabella's heart pounded with fear and longing. He took her hands in his, searching her face. "I love you, Isabella," he said, voice raw and certain. "Whatever comes, I love you." She could not speak. She could only press her lips to his, surrendering to the warmth of his embrace, the promise of a future she dared not trust. As the night deepened, shadows lengthened in the corners of the old house. In the hush after laughter, in the stillness before dawn, Isabella lay beside her husband, her secret lying between them, silent, potent, unresolved. What neither of them saw was the silhouette standing beneath the ancient yew in the garden, watching the lighted window with a predator's patience. The truth, once buried, was stirring, and its hour was fast approaching. Candlelight flickered across the velvet drapes of the bridal chamber, gilding the air with warmth and shadows. A hush lingered in the room, broken only by the muted thrum of Isabella's heart as she stood near the window, her white gown trailing like spilled moonlight. She was alone for a moment, gathering courage, tracing the delicate embroidery at her wrist as if the stitches might tether her to reality. The door opened behind her. Alexander entered, his presence filling the chamber, his expression softened by tenderness and the intimacy of new vows. He crossed to her, his footsteps barely a whisper on the thick carpet. "You are exquisite," he said, his voice husky with wonder and love. She turned to him, forcing a smile that trembled at the edges. "I can scarcely believe this is real." He reached for her, drawing her close, his hands gentle as they cupped her face. Their lips met, soft, searching, promising 1,000 unspoken things. He murmured her name, and the sound of it dissolved her last defenses. But as his touch deepened, Alexander sensed a stiffness in her, a delicate trembling that was not the tremor of anticipation, but of fear. He pulled back, searching her face. "Isabella, are you unwell?" She shook her head quickly, eyes wide. No, I'm only nervous, I suppose. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. There is nothing to fear. I'm your husband now. You are safe with me. She nodded, but her body remained tense, her hands fluttering uncertainly at his shoulders. As he loosened the laces of her gown, his fingers paused, noting the awkwardness of her movements, the sudden intake of breath. When he pressed a gentle kiss to her bare shoulder, she flinched, her breath catching audibly. Alexander stilled. He stepped back, concern sharpening his features. Isabella, have you ever... The words hung between them. She could not meet his gaze. Her silence was answer enough. He drew a slow, careful breath. I do not mean to embarrass you, but you told me you were a widow. I had thought. She covered her face with trembling hands. Tears slipped through her fingers, silent and uncontrollable. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice raw with shame. I'm so sorry. He reached for her, but she recoiled, sobbing now. Please, Alexander, let me explain. He folded his arms, his face hardening with a pain she had never seen before. Explain then. Isabella slid to her knees, her gown pooling around her like a shroud. Words tumbled from her in broken gasps, the dam of secrecy finally shattered. I lied. I was never married. There was no husband, no India, no tragic loss. My father was ruined, ill. My brother was only a child. There was no hope for us, not as we were. I became the widow Montfort because it was the only way. The only way to save them. I never meant to hurt you, I swear it. Alexander's jaw clenched. He looked away, his breath coming in sharp, controlled bursts. You deceived me. You deceived everyone. Our marriage is built on a lie. She crawled to him, clutching at the hem of his coat. Forgive me. I was desperate. I could not watch my family starve. I tried to tell you. I tried 100 times. But I was afraid. You have every right to hate me. He drew away, his eyes bright with fury and pain. You should have trusted me. I would have helped you. I would have done anything for you, Isabella. She sobbed harder, her voice cracking. I know, but I was so afraid you would despise me. I could not lose you, not after everything. He closed his eyes, as if the sight of her wounded him more than the words themselves. Silence stretched between them, taut and suffocating. When he spoke, his voice was low and cold. Get up. She struggled to her feet, tears streaking her face, her body racked with remorse. Alexander's features were carved from ice. I need time. Time to decide what to do about you, about us, about this marriage. Until then, you will stay here. You will not leave Ravenshire, nor will you see your family. I will not be made a spectacle before the world. Isabella's hands trembled at her sides. Please, Alexander. He stepped back, the distance between them now an unbridgeable chasm. No, enough. I have been made a fool once before. I will not be again. He strode to the door, pausing with his hand on the latch. For a moment, his shoulders sagged, as if the weight of disappointment was almost more than he could bear. Then he straightened, his voice a final verdict. Do not seek me tonight. I will let you know when I have reached my decision. The door closed behind him with a quiet finality, leaving Isabella in the silence of the bridal chamber, her dreams in ruins at her feet. She sank to the floor, clutching her knees, racked by sobs that seemed to tear her apart. The candlelight wavered, blurring the edges of the world, and somewhere far below, the ancient house creaked with secrets. Outside, the night pressed close against the windows, and the future once so bright now loomed, uncertain and unforgiving. Neither Isabella nor Alexander could see what the coming dawn would bring, nor how fate would test them both before the end. The world within Ravenshire grew small, its walls pressing in on Isabella like the closing jaws of a trap. She drifted from room to room, a pale, silent figure in mourning once more, but now for herself. Servants averted their eyes, the household's laughter died at her approach. The great windows that once seemed to promise freedom now only framed her captivity. The day after her confession, Alexander vanished into his study and gave strict instructions. Isabella was not to be disturbed nor permitted to leave the estate. Meals arrived on trays left outside her door. At night, she lay alone in the vast bridal chamber, haunted by the echo of her own deception and the memory of Alexander's devastated gaze. The Duchess struck first. She summoned Isabella to the morning room, where sunlight spilled coldly across damask and ivory. The older woman's composure was a mask of steel. "You have disgraced this family," the Duchess said, her words sharp as a blade. "You must understand the severity of what you have done, not only to my son, but to all of us. London is a furnace for scandal. It will devour your name, and ours with it." Isabella bowed her head, unable to speak. "You must leave, publicly and with shame," the Duchess continued. "There is no place here for a liar. If you do not go willingly, I will see to it that you are cast out." Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. "I have nowhere to go, my lady. I ask only that you allow me to write to my family." The Duchess's eyes narrowed. "Write your goodbyes, then, but you will not take the Ravenshire name with you." When Isabella returned to her chamber, she found Lord Hawthorne waiting in the corridor, his posture rigid, his expression triumphant. "Did I not warn you?" he sneered. "You thought yourself clever, but a woman's lies always come to light. The city will relish your downfall." She faced him with what dignity she could muster. "You have what you wanted, my lord. My ruin. Leave me to it." He leaned close, his voice a low hiss. "I will see to it that every drawing-room in Mayfair whispers your name with contempt. You are nothing now, not even a wife." She did not flinch, though tears burned in her eyes. "It is enough. Please leave me." He strode away, victorious. Alone, Isabella pressed her forehead to the cold wall, her hands shaking. The door closed softly behind her. Downstairs, Alexander paced the length of his study, fists clenched, memories of Isabella's confession battering his heart. Pride and love warred within him, one urging him to denounce her, to preserve his honor, the other reminding him of every moment of laughter, every shared confidence, every kindness she had shown him. Her voice haunted him, the raw desperation of her plea. "I was so afraid you would despise me. I could not lose you. Not after everything." His mother's voice cut through his thoughts, demanding action. "You must repudiate her publicly, Alexander. If you delay, the world will think you complicit in her deceit. There can be no forgiveness for this." "And yet," he said, his voice ragged, "I cannot forget how I loved her." The Duchess's features hardened. "Love is not enough. Your duty is to your name." He turned away. Unable to answer, upstairs, Isabella prepared for the only future she could now imagine. She sat at her writing desk, candlelight trembling over the page as she composed her final letter. "My dearest Alexander, by the time you read this, I will be gone. I cannot repay the kindness you showed me, nor can I undo the pain I have caused. The fault is mine alone. Let no blame fall on your house or on my family. I release all claim to your name, your fortune, your protection. I ask only that you remember for a little while the happiness we shared. Forgive me if you can. I will not trouble you again. Isabella." She folded the letter, sealed it with trembling hands, and placed it atop the dressing table where she knew he would find it. She changed out of her fine silk gown, donning the plainest dress she owned, and wrapped herself in a dark shawl. All that remained was to slip away before the house awoke. But as she gathered her meager belongings, she paused at the window, gazing out at the moonlit gardens she had once believed would shelter her. Her heart broke anew at the memory of Alexander's arms around her, the promise in his voice. "Whatever burdens you carry, you do not bear them alone now." Now she bore them all. Her father and brother would be safe, but she would pay the price in exile and disgrace. She moved quietly through the corridors, avoiding the servants' quarters and the Duchess's watchful eye. She paused at the threshold of Alexander's study, longing for a final glimpse, but the door was closed, the light within faint and unmoving. She slipped down the servants' stair, her footsteps muffled, her breath shallow. The front door loomed ahead, the world beyond it cold and uncertain. Meanwhile, in the study, Alexander sat in the darkness, the letter from Isabella burning in his hand. He read and reread her words, anger and grief twisting within him. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. There can be no forgiveness for this. But Isabella's voice was stronger still. Forgive me if you can. He pressed the letter to his lips, torn by the knowledge that whatever he decided, nothing would ever be the same. Outside, as Isabella stepped into the night, the chill wrapped around her like penance. She did not look back. What neither she nor Alexander yet realized was that the world beyond Ravenshire's gates was already stirring with news, and that choices made in the shadows would soon be forced into the unforgiving light of day. Alexander stood in the library, Isabella's letter trembling in his hand, the words a brand on his soul. Candlelight guttered in the draught, throwing wild shadows across the shelves. For what felt like an eternity, he paced the length of the room, the weight of his decision pressing heavier with each step. He heard her voice in every corner, her confession, her plea for forgiveness, her promise to bear all blame alone. In the silent aftermath of betrayal, his pride had roared for vengeance, for the clean cut of repudiation. Yet now, staring down at the elegant slant of her handwriting, he saw not deception, but sacrifice. The memory of her laughter, the gentleness in her touch, the courage she had shown in the face of a merciless world, these things shone brighter than any lie. He crushed the letter to his chest. What have I done? Downstairs, the mansion seethed with tension. Word of Isabella's deception had begun to ripple through the staff and, inevitably, to the drawing rooms of Mayfair. The Duchess moved through the house like a storm in lavender silk, summoning Alexander to her side. You cannot hesitate, Alexander, she declared, her eyes fierce. The scandal has already begun to spread. If you do not repudiate her publicly, your name will be dragged through the mud. Our family's honor. He cut her off, voice rough with conviction. Enough, mother. I have heard all I care to hear about honor. She recoiled, stunned by his defiance. You would defend her after all she has done. He met her gaze, pain and resolve intermingling in his eyes. I would defend her, yes, because she has shown more courage than any of us. You speak of scandal. What of compassion? What of justice? Lord Hawthorne, who had forced his way into the household on the pretense of offering counsel, seized the moment. You are a fool, Blackwood. She has made a laughingstock of you, of all of us. London will never forgive this. Alexander faced him, cold fury in every line of his body. London will forgive what I tell it to forgive. This is my house, my marriage, and my decision. You forget yourself, Hawthorne. The Duchess's lips thinned. You would invite ruin for her sake? I would stand in front of the whole world for her sake. Alexander answered, his voice ringing out. She lied, yes, but her lie was born of desperation, not malice. She risked everything for her family when all others had abandoned her. The assembled nobles' anxious relations, curious matrons, and a smattering of the most influential peers had gathered in the drawing room, summoned by whispers of the scandal. Alexander strode into their midst, every inch the marquess. He raised his voice, letting it carry through marble and silk and the brittle certainties of aristocratic life. I know what you have all heard. Yes, my wife deceived us. She wore a widow's weeds and wove a tale that was not hers, but she did so to save the lives of those she loved, at a time when no one else would lift a hand to help them. I declare before you all that my marriage stands. Isabella is my wife, and she shall remain so. Her honor is henceforth my own. If you wish to judge her, you must judge me as well. A hush fell. No one dared speak. The Duchess's face was white with rage. Lord Hawthorne's mouth twisted with defeat. Hawthorne broke the silence first, his voice brittle. You will regret this, Blackwood. Society will not forget. Alexander's eyes blazed. Then let them remember that I chose love over cruelty. Let them remember that Ravensshire does not cast aside the innocent. With nothing left to say, Lord Hawthorne turned and stalked from the room, his pride in tatters. The noblewomen exchanged uncertain glances. The men looked away, cowed by the force of Alexander's declaration. Meanwhile, Isabella stood at the edge of the estate, her bundle clutched tightly, the iron gates looming before her. She was pale, her eyes swollen from weeping, but her spine was straight, her chin lifted with the last of her dignity. She paused, one hand on the cold metal, steeling herself for exile. Suddenly, footsteps thundered across the gravel behind her. She turned, heart pounding. Isabella! Alexander's voice rang out. He was running, his hair tousled, his coat flapping behind him. He reached her, breathless, and seized her hands in his. "Do not go," he pleaded. "Do not leave me. I was a fool. I let my pride blind me, when all I truly wanted was you." Tears sprang to her eyes. "Alexander, I have brought ruin to your house. I have no right." He pressed her hands to his lips. "You are my wife, my heart. I care nothing for the world's opinion. Forgive me. Forgive my harshness, my hesitation. I see you now, Isabella, not as a fraud, but as the bravest woman I have ever known." She broke down then, sobbing into his chest, his arms closing around her with desperate relief. "I thought I had lost you," she whispered. "You never will, not while I have breath." He drew her back toward the house, past the stunned servants and the watching faces at the window. Together they returned to the drawing room, where Alexander faced his family and peers once more. "I present to you my wife," he said, his voice unwavering. "She has my name, my trust, and my love. Let any who would challenge that speak now." No one did. The Duchess at last turned away, defeated. The tide of scandal, once poised to consume them, ebbed before Alexander's unyielding resolve. That night, as the house settled into uneasy silence, Isabella lay in Alexander's arms, the future uncertain, but their bond unbroken. She knew that the world would not soon forget her deception, nor would forgiveness come easily. But in the circle of his embrace, she found hope, a hope that no lie, no matter how desperate, could ever truly destroy. What neither of them could yet see was that the greatest test of their love was still to come, one that would require a sacrifice deeper than either had ever imagined. The storm that had threatened to tear Ravenshire asunder passed, leaving the estate washed in the pale gold of an autumn morning. Isabella awoke in Alexander's arms, her cheek pressed to his shoulder, their hands twined together. The silence between them was easy now, a gentle hush broken only by the call of larks beyond the window. Truth had settled between them, a fragile, precious thing, but theirs at last. For the first time since her arrival in London, Isabella felt no need to pretend. The shadows of her deception had lifted, replaced by the clear light of understanding. Alexander, too, moved with a new certainty. His pride had been tempered in the fires of humiliation, and what emerged was stronger, steadier, a love stripped of illusion, but richer for it. They rose together, sharing laughter over tea and toast as the household stirred to life. Alexander watched her from across the breakfast table, his gaze soft. "Will you walk with me?" he asked. She smiled, her eyes shining. "Always." They strolled through the gardens, the damp grass sparkling beneath their feet. The air was crisp, the world hushed as if in awe of their reconciliation. Alexander spoke of plans for the estate, of the tenants' needs, of the future they might build together. "I wish I had known your fears sooner," he said quietly, his hand brushing hers. "I wish I had seen past your silence." Isabella squeezed his fingers. "I wish I had trusted you sooner, but I will never keep my heart from you again. That I promise." He stopped beneath the boughs of an ancient yew, turning to face her. "No more secrets. Whatever comes, we face it together." "No more secrets," she echoed, her voice fierce with conviction. Word of Alexander's defiance and Isabella's courage spread quickly through society. At first, the drawing rooms of London buzzed with scandal and speculation. Some called for Isabella's banishment, others whispered of Ravenshire's fall. But as the days passed, the tide began to turn. Lady Wycliffe, a matron of formidable influence, called upon Isabella, her manner brisk but not unkind. "You have given London quite the shock, Mrs. Blackwood," she remarked, "but I find I rather admire a woman who defends her family so fiercely." Isabella met her gaze with quiet dignity. "I did what I thought was right. I regret the pain I caused, but I cannot regret saving my brother and father." Lady Wycliffe smiled, a rare warmth in her eyes. "You will do well here, I think." Others followed. Invitations to teas, requests for Isabella's patronage at charitable events, notes of sympathy and respect. Alexander's steadfastness lent weight to her acceptance. But Isabella's own composure and honesty won over even the most skeptical hearts. There were difficult moments still. At a dinner hosted by Lord Pembroke, a guest made a barbed comment about impostors at court. The table fell silent, all eyes turning to Isabella. She lifted her chin and replied, "I was never an impostor in my love for my family or my husband. I believe that is all anyone can ask of a woman." Alexander reached for her hand, pride shining in his eyes. The moment passed, and the conversation resumed, this time with Isabella firmly in its center. With time, even the Duchess's opposition began to thaw. She watched her son's happiness, the ease with which Isabella managed the estate and welcomed guests, and the unguarded laughter that filled the halls once more. One afternoon she summoned Isabella to her sitting room. "My son is changed," the Duchess admitted, her voice measured. "He is happier than I have seen him in years. I will not pretend your actions did not wound me, but I see now that you are worthy of his devotion." Isabella's voice was steady. "I never wished to bring shame to your house, my lady. I only wanted to protect those I loved." The Duchess studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "That is a sentiment I can respect. Welcome to Ravenshire, Isabella." Tears pricked Isabella's eyes, but she managed a smile. "Thank you, my lady." Letters from Hampshire brought further relief. Her father, now restored to health and comfort, wrote with uncharacteristic joy, "Arthur is thriving, and I find myself at peace for the first time in many years. We owe you more than I can say, my dearest girl. Be happy, and know you are loved." The burden that had weighed upon Isabella's heart lifted at last. She and Alexander rebuilt their life together, brick by brick, day by day. They spent long afternoons in the library, reading poetry aloud. They rode through the countryside, laughing in the wind. They hosted friends and family, their home a haven of warmth and acceptance. One evening, as the fire crackled in the hearth, Alexander drew Isabella close. "I thought I knew what love was," he murmured, "but it is more than passion, more than pride. It is trust and forgiveness and the courage to begin again." She smiled, resting her head against his chest. "We have both learned much, I think." He kissed her hair. "Let us never hide our hearts from each other again." "We will not," she promised, her voice certain. As the seasons turned and Ravenshire bloomed with new life, Alexander and Isabella found the peace they had fought so hard to earn. Their love, forged in adversity, was now the quiet anchor of their days. The past had been redeemed by honesty, and the future belonged to them, unshadowed by fear, unbroken by doubt. They stood together at the threshold of their home, sunlight spilling around them, the world wide and welcoming at last. And hand in hand, they stepped forward, hearts open, secrets banished, their love a promise renewed with every dawn.